Okay, all right. I think we're live. Perfect. Let me do the damn thing and see what this looks like. Too dark? Perfect. Okay. Let me do this. Just quickly share it out so all the folks can hang out with us. Okay. Let's do this. Share now. Perfect. And then do that. Then do this. Edit post. Come hang. Perfect. Okay. Awesome. Hello, everybody. How we doing today? How's everybody doing? It is. If those of you live in the Northeast, you'll know that it's actually been really fucking nice this week, and it's funny because really nice is really relative, right? We have because we get like pretty cold days over here. Whenever we have like a pocket of 40-degree days, it feels like Christ has risen. Like it's just unbelievable, right? We're going out, we're wearing t-shirts, things are good, life is great, like we're hanging out, we're having a good time. So I it was that kind of day today. If my window regulator worked on my Phaeton, I would have even lowered my driver's side window, but instead it does not. So I kept that bitch up. But tomorrow it's going to be even warmer. It's going to touch 50. So really excited for that. Looking forward to potentially enjoying the weather and hoping that it means that things will just get nicer out. I mean, I think we've been dealing with a lot of cold and a lot of salt on the roads, which has meant that we really can't do the things that we want to do, drive the cars that we want to drive. I think that's probably the main negative to the East Coast compared to the West, where West Coast you can enjoy your car year round. Here, we really can only enjoy the cars we love during a certain like specific period. So that's probably the most annoying thing, but it is what it is. I will say there is a lot of car news to cover today. I feel like I say this every week now. I know we had a lightish week last week, but it feels like every week now we're just gaining in momentum for the amount of car news that's coming out, which makes my job fun because it makes this podcast a lot of fun. And I'm really, really excited to walk you guys through that. There truly is a ton of stuff. If I'm counting, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 new cars that released this week alone. So 7 new cars came out. So let's get into it, shall we? Let's talk about things. So the first car that I want to talk about is this Bad Larry right here. This is a new project from Gembala. And for those of you guys that don't know, Gembala's like an OG to the Porsche tuning world. Like they're one of, if not the greatest Porsche tuners of our time, right? Like if you guys grew up with Porsche, you knew that Gembala made the most garish, outlandish, and some of the highest horsepower things in the Porsche world. Like there's no doubt about that. And if you guys want to look into it, check out cars like the old school Gembala Avalanche and things like that. Crazy history, though. The founder of Gembala passed away. He got killed, supposedly. If you guys want to look into that story, it's like a crazy rabbit hole about like investors, and he was found dead, and like it nuts. But anyway, his son has picked up the buck and the mantle and is bringing the company back, and this is their first project. This car's code name is Project Sandbox. And the reason why we have a lot of information on this car is a couple things, but one, it's Clubhouse. You guys know what Clubhouse is? Have you guys heard of Clubhouse? If you guys have, let me know in the chat. By the way, I'm on there. Follow Money Shift on Clubhouse. But effectively, what it is it's an app that's a chat room, right? It's only available to iOS users. Sucks for Android, but anyway, it's a chat room where you can hop into rooms and just listen or talk, right? Depending on, your comfort level or whatever the subject matter is or who's talking, things like that. And for whatever reason, the car community portion of Clubhouse has been really interesting. Like, not only has the conversation been great, but the people that are participating in the conversation are bringing forth some really awesome stories. So, for example, there was a guy from the Spiker company. You guys remember Spyker, the supercar company that made these like outlandish looking things with crazy aluminum pieces and all this shit? But anyway, he was telling a story about how Chris Bangle, designer for BMW, made cars like the X6, made cars like the M5, stuff like that, walked into the Spyker factory, saw the Peking to Paris, which if you guys haven't seen this thing, that was Spyker's SUV, right? Came out a while ago. And he saw that design and he was then inspired to create an SUV called the X6, and boom. Right? That was a story that had never been talked about before, but in a platform like that, you can hear about it. So in that same platform, Mark Gambala, which is Gambala's son, was on there talking about Project Sandbox. And these are the details that we got and we heard from that meeting. So there will be 40 of these cars. They will have a 3.7 liter twin turbo engine from the 992 Turbo S. That motor will be tuned by Roof, just like the original Gambala cars, which is pretty cool. In stage 1 form, it'll have 750 horsepower and 604 pound-feet of torque. What they were really going for was something that was reliable, that would work consistently, where there would be no problems with the engine. Now, the suspension is where the biggest technical change happens to this car, right? Is effectively a 992 Turbo S911 that's heavily modified. So they really set out to find a suspension system that would work with the complexity of the all-wheel drive system, right? Because a 992 Turbo 911 has not only an immensely complex all-wheel drive system, but it also has things like rear axle steer, wet mode, things like that. And they were actually able to develop a suspension that works with all of those systems. So if you want to use wet mode, if you want to have rear axle steer, things like that, this car can have all of those things. And with the press of a button, you can actually raise the car and give it 25 centimeters of ground clearance, which is the same as a 959 could get, right? So this has a hydraulic lift system on the inside, which was developed by a company that made the 918 suspension, the 911 RSR suspension, and the same company that made the Cayman Rally project. Do you guys remember that? There was like a video of Porsche touting around this test for a Cayman Rally car, which was really cool. So Gambala worked with them, worked with KW to help develop the dampers, is working with Roof to develop the motor, and the body of this thing looks freaking sick, right? I love the potential that they're converting a 992 styled 911 into a 959. Like the 959 is that car for me. Like some people have the F40, some people have, you know, the EB110, the McLaren F1, whatever. The 959 is it for me. And to see it coming back to life, and not only coming back to life with Roof and Gambala, which are just like the two OGs of the Porsche tuning space, that's killer, right? That's really, really cool. So I'm super excited to see this car. Mark said we're about 1 month away from the launch of this. So stay tuned for this podcast in 1 month, where we're definitely going to be covering this car in all its details, because I am really, really excited to see this thing, to see what it'll do, to see how it'll perform. And I'm sure you guys are too. So I'll definitely keep you guys in the loop for that. The next news, more Porsche news. Well, not really Porsche news so much as it's a tuner that makes cars with Porsche. Jeff, couldn't agree with your 959 opinion anymore. My man, you're spot on, as is usual. I mean, I think the car was a technological tour de force when it came out, right? And that's not to say that the F40 isn't cool. The F40 is sick, no doubt. But to me, the 959 just hit the right notes. You know what I mean? And it seems like you agree, which is smart man, so it obviously makes sense. But let's move on to the second Porsche that we want to talk about today, and that's the new Gunther Roadster. And holy shit, look at this fucking car. It looks so good. It looks so good in every color, in every shape. It just has the style. Oh my goodness. I like this car. It gets me hot and heavy. But anyway, let's talk about the details before I get too crazy and enamored with the looks of this car. So Obviously, this is a 993 that is remastered. For those of you that don't know who Gunther is, they focus on really remastering the 993 chassis. They saw the 964 and what Singer does with that, and they really just wanted to corner the 993 side of the market with this. Michelle, tell me what you don't know, man. I don't know. I know the F40 is it. I know the F1 is cool. The F1 is the god, right? There's no doubt. We'll talk about what might replace that as the GOAT in a little bit, but the 959 was cool. Definitely cool. So back to this thing. This thing has a 4-liter flat six from Roth Sport Racing. It makes 435 horsepower, 335 pound-feet of torque. This is rear-wheel drive, and it uses an updated 993 gearbox, and that's a GetRag gearbox. So it's a pretty solid unit, right? It's rear-wheel drive, again, like I said, and it's a considerable amount of time was taken to ensure that this car had the same or more chassis stiffness compared to the coupe that the company already makes. And they were able to do that leveraging a lot of carbon fiber, a lot of aluminum, a lot of everything, right? And it looks the beans. The beans, for sure. Big shout out to Patricia and to Brian with the 50 and 100 stars. Thank you guys. Truly appreciate that. And if you guys are watching the stream, don't forget to hit a like. It helps the channel a lot, for sure. So appreciate that. Thank you, man. Sub, appreciate that for sure. Yeah, this thing is definitely stunning. There's no doubt about it. It's probably one of the better looking remasters. I think if you compare this to other cars in the space, which is like Singers and things like that, the Singer probably has smoother lines overall. But if you're a 993 fan over something like a 964 or a 930 in that 911 lineage, then this is your mecca, right? And there's no doubt that it's a beautiful car, but how much are we paying for this? How much? What do you guys think we're dropping down to get this thing over here? Because it's a lot of money. I'll tell you that right now. And I mean, with good reason, right? There's a lot of carbon fiber, a lot of aluminum. It's all new bodies. It's all new chassis, like all that shit, right? It's $500,000. $565,000 is where this thing starts. Guys, starts. Michelle, you were close, my man. You were close. You were very, very close with the 550 guess. This thing is 565 starting. Brian says the windshield almost looks frameless. Yeah, you're totally right. That I love it. There's just nothing wrong with this design for me. But I love that green. There's a picture that I'm showing in this slideshow where there's the silver one and a green one side by side. Yeesh, that green one looks good. Oh my goodness. Yeah, Michelle, go play the lottery, man, because I don't know, though. If you win, would you buy one of these over a Singer or something else? Because don't get me wrong, these are absolutely beautiful. I should be doing it this way. These are absolutely beautiful. There's no doubt. But I don't know. The Singers just hit that extra spot for me. But anyway, let's move on to some cheaper cars. But I'm gonna let you guys know we're gonna be ending on probably the most expensive car note that we've ever talked about on this show. Brian says, do you have enough stars to buy it yet? No, but if I stream every day for the next 50 years based on the average income, then I'll have enough to buy one wheel. But no, I do appreciate all the stars for sure. Shout out to Joe with the 50 stars. He says, Thanasi is a cuter Johnny Lieberman. Send stars if you agree. I don't know, guys. If you agree, Joe laid down the gauntlet. So let him know. Thank you for that, Joe. Appreciate it. Jeff says, it's gorgeous, but I would not spend $500,000. Yeah, I agree, man. Like, $500,000 is a lot of money. A lot of money. And I know that's coming from someone who drives something under $10,000. But I'm sure even the wealthy would agree that $500,000 is a lot of money for this car, right? They have to agree. They have to. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe we can throw together a room in Clubhouse or something and talk about it with some of those folks. But anyway, let's move on to something a little slower. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, it's a little less exotic than this, but I think it's something that's really, really cool. And maybe this is just my like inner car nerd that thinks something is cool and I want to share it with you guys. And that's just how excited I am. But anyway, if it's a big bust and you guys don't actually want to hear about it, we can quickly move on. But I think this is something that you might like, you might not. But we're going to start with a picture of what is probably the most interesting aspect of this. And I know we got Brian in the chat who is a father. So maybe this, maybe this car is actually for this audience. Anyway, what are you guys looking at? You're looking at the second row of the Kia Carnival. Carnival, horrible name. I'm going to be like really bad name. Maybe one of the worst. But this is Kia's new minivan. And they're not calling it a minivan. They're calling it a multi-purpose vehicle. And multi-purpose it is, and I'll tell you why. Let's run through the details of this Kia Carnival really quick. It's got a 3.5-liter V6, makes 290 horsepower, 262 pound-feet of torque, gets around 22 combined mpg, but it can tow, I'll just bang my camera off, 3,500 pounds. 3,500 pounds. It can tow 3,500 pounds. What does that mean? Joe in the chat, Joe already knows what this means. It means it can tow small trailers and it can tow a Miata with the right attitude. Okay. Jeff, if I was a nursing mother, I'd pre-order that. Hey, it's 2021, my friend. You can be for the right price. With SUV-like character, Kia's new multi-purpose vehicle delivers a combination, and this is their words, not mine, premium design, intelligent packaging, and an abundance of innovation in safety technology. They say this is their first vehicle to use the new Kia badge. It has these second row seats that have the ability to lay back, which is kick-ass. It can be 7-passenger. It can be 8-passenger. It has the intercom system. Front-wheel drive, it can tow a lot of weight for something in its class. It actually tows slightly more than some of the smaller pickup trucks, right? There's some specs of Colorado that actually tow less than this thing. So, I don't know. I like the design. I hate the name. I love that everyone is doing all these reclining seat features. Give me that. Right? If you're telling me I'm going from Massachusetts to Florida or doing some sort of long road trip, that's where I want to be. I want to be in that second row. I want to be cocked back. I want to be looking at the TV. That's what I want. And that's where the Carnival comes in, especially because it can be towing something. Right? Joe says they're targeting the same market as the people that go on Carnival cruises, which, by the way, money shift stance, every single cruise ship should be nuked from orbit. That's just where I stand. But anyway, Brian says, looks like the Sienna and the Explorer had a baby they didn't want. That's funny, Brian. That's true. I knew this isn't, when we're following up something like the Gunther, something like the Gambala design, the Kia Carnival isn't going to be the thing that sets the money shift, podcast ablaze, right? There's no doubt about it. But I can't deny that I actually think this thing is really cool, and it brings some interesting things to the minivan space that I'm surprised haven't even been thought of, right? Like that seat design alone, the fact that that isn't a mainstay on every single minivan is shocking to me, right? Absolutely shocking. The TVs here, they look great. They look like something that would belong in a premium SUV. And the looks overall for the car are pretty nice. Like, this thing, is relatively easy on the eyes. Kia's new design language is solid. So overall, I'm happy with this thing. Sure, do I wish it could pull more? No doubt. Do I wish it was all-wheel drive? No doubt. Do I wish it had better fuel efficiency? Sure. But at the end of the day, Kia's making some moves here. Brian says the seats are badass, but imagine a kid going up and down while you're driving. See, this is the feedback I need because as a childless man, this stuff just doesn't come to my mind, But hey, who knows? Maybe you can lock it into place, I don't know. Maybe. But anyway, before we get too wrapped up in this like Kia Carnival thing, let's just move on. So another car that came out this week, actually today. Like literally I was scrambling because today there was a lot of cars that came out that I had to add to this podcast, which is why we were a half hour late. I had the podcast all set, ready to go. All of a sudden I come home. What do you know? X, Y, and Z come out. Brian was that child, says Jeff. I can believe it for sure. I probably would have done the same thing though, if I'm honest. But anyway, what are you guys looking at? You are looking at the brand new Mercedes C-Class. Okay, so this is the smallest, the second smallest sedan in the Mercedes range. This is probably the most popular one. This is the one you're going to see everywhere. This is the one you're going to see flexed on Instagram from, every man, woman, and child that graduate college that are like, hey, look at what I just bought. Check it out. They're flexing with their Casio watch next to the steering wheel. This is that car, right? It's all new for 2022. And they did a lot of interesting things with this car that I don't know if I like. And a lot of things that I do like. So let's talk about the details of the base car, the C300, which is going to be the first vehicle to come to the United States, the first spec of the C-Class, okay? Joe says these will only be leased. You'd be surprised. They actually sell a shit ton of these. But yes, there's definitely going to be a lot of people that lease them, and for good reason. Mercedes tends to facelift that design pretty routinely right on a lease cycle. But anyway, the C300 uses a 2-liter twin-scroll turbo 4-cylinder engine. That engine makes 255 horsepower and 295 pound-feet of torque. In addition to that, there is a mild hybrid system that adds up to 148 torque at the push of a button. Shout out to Formula One technology. Which means this base C300 or C300 4MATIC, doesn't matter, both of them do all their times in the same vein, right, or the same speed. They do 0 to 60 in 5.9 seconds, okay? And their top speed is limited to 130 miles an hour. The engine is mounted longitudinally, and it's still a rear-wheel drive chassis. They didn't swap to front-wheel drive for this car. It uses a 9G Tronic 9-speed transmission, which is 30% lighter than the outgoing transmission. It has an 11.9-inch screen that's at the center stack there, the one that's angled, which is huge. And it has an even bigger one for the driver, 12.3 inches. So what do I like? What do I not like? All engine in the base model. Having 295 pound-feet of torque, and with that mild hybrid system, this will likely be a highly efficient small sedan, which is something that's great, right? It's got enough pep with that torque to give you the speed that you'll want, but it probably gets enough efficiency. I think the interior, I'm like 50-50 on. If you guys are watching, let me know what you think about this, because I could go either way. There's some moments of this where I really love it. Like this shot right here, it's beautiful. Like this interior is really nice from this shot. It has a lot of S-Class in it. There's a lot of Mercedes S-Class in this interior, and there's no doubt about that, right? How Mercedes usually does their cars is they release the S-Class first, the Mac Daddy of the brand, okay? And then they work their way down. The E-Class comes, the C-Class comes, but all of them look like the S-Class to some degree. BMW is the opposite. BMW shows the 3 Series, and then they go up 5, and then they go up 7. All of them look like the 3. Okay, so what do you guys think about the looks here? Terry says it's like an 80% S-Class. Exactly right. Exactly right. Jeff says, I hate the touchscreens. They look nice, but suck when you're actually driving. And that's a really good point, because I think in a car like this, that's doing 0 to 60 in 6 seconds, you're not going to be driving crazy speeds. I think the touchscreen is fine because it gives you enough time to where if there's really good haptics on that touchscreen, you're not really fiddling with it or fucking with it, But once you start getting faster, right, the AMG variants of this car or something like that, using that touchscreen is a pain in the ass. It's really hard, right? I mean, we got Michelle in the chat. He's got an E92 M3. Leveraging that like iDrive as you're trying to drive at speed is a nightmare. And it's the same thing with the touchscreen. Shout out to John with the follow. How you doing, man? Appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for joining. But yeah, so Jeff's got a great point with the touchscreens. I will say though, this one is beautiful. And they actually have an optional AR technology with it, which is like an alternate reality, right? Where they'll actually show a camera on that. So it'll show the front camera of the car. And projected onto that will be your... So in the S-Class, it's on the windshield. The AR technology will actually say like, hey, your left is up here, and it'll show you where on the windscreen. In the C-Class, it's on that center stack. So that center stack will change to a camera, and that camera will then have AR over it that'll say, hey, your left, it's this road right here. Hey, your right, it's that road right there. Hey, your exit, it's this one. And it'll highlight it all for you. Pretty cool. Pretty cool, right? The one thing that isn't cool is something that we touched on last week, and it's that now all of the C classes will be 4-cylinder to some degree. So for those of you that don't know a ton about the C class, that means that the C43, which currently is an inline-6 twin turbo, will be a 4-cylinder turbo. And that means the C63, which is currently a twin turbo V8, will be a 4-cylinder turbo. That sucks, right? Like, even if they have more horsepower, even if they're more efficient, even if they're quicker, that kind of sucks, right? Now, there's rumors as to what the car that's going to be replacing the C43 is going to be. And even though it's going to have 415 horsepower, even though it's going to have 369 pound-feet of torque, and likely be faster than the C43 it's replacing, how the hell are you going to replace an i6 twin turbo with a twin scroll turbo 4 and some electric? Right, Terry? That sucks big time. You're totally right, dude. Like, cars that you buy, in my view, and we'll get to it later when we talk about the new car from Lexus, but cars, in my view, when you're buying an AMG, an M, an RS, a CTSV, a whatever, right? It's not only the experience that you get and feel when you're driving it, right? The steering, the chassis, the acceleration, like all the things you feel, but it's also what you hear. And that's why in my book, the F80 M3, the last generation M3, is a step below the C63. Because even though it's just as fast, maybe in some respects faster, that engine just doesn't cut it like that twin turbo V8 does sound-wise. And that's a big part of it with these cars. And Terry hits the nail on the head here when he says the lower trims will be worth more than the C63. Because if you think about it, if they're leveraging the same 2.0 liter twin scroll 4 with the same plug-in hybrid technology, and they're just changing small things to give it more power, maybe a different turbo, right? For the C63 variant, then what's the point? Now we have almost like a Golf GTI Golf R situation, right? Where I know it's front wheel drive to all wheel drive, but in a world where both of them were all wheel drive, you replace the turbo on the GTI and now you got a Golf R. It's the exact same thing, right? So I don't know. We'll see what comes of the C63. Hopefully they do things that are more interesting with that power plant in order to really warrant what it can do. Because right now I'm very much so put off by Mercedes, and they've been my favorite brand of that sort of trio of Audi, BMW, Mercedes for a while now. I think they've been putting out some of the best things, but this move to make all 4-cylinders for the C-Class, while it makes sense, while I understand from an efficiency standpoint for cars like the C300 to be a turbo 4-cylinder, it doesn't really ring the bell for me with the V8. It doesn't. I'm sorry, especially when they're definitely going to be producing bigger motors for cars like the S-Class, cars like the E-Class, cars like the AMG GT 4-door. So why not shove it in this? Hell, you put the same V8 you put in all those cars in this. So what's the point? Anyway, this is the new C-Class. I'm overall excited. I think the design looks fine. It's a bit boring in the back, especially the previous or current gen C-Class better. But, you know, I'm not offended if I'm a Mercedes fan of the design of this vehicle, right? I think they overall did okay. Terry says, I'm scared of a C63 with a 4-cylinder and 500 horsepower if they're trying to match the current C63. Yeah, dude, totally, because that's what they accessor to that car. So that's a big hill to climb, and the most that they've been able to do is, by the way, the most horsepower that anyone's been able to extract out of a production 4-cylinder, and that's 355 horsepower. That's in their, like, CLA 45 AMG. So they got to add an extra 150 to that, and maybe that's where the electric comes in order to hit that number. But now a 2.0 liter turbo 4-cylinder with electric power doesn't give me the same, it doesn't rustle my jimmies like a V8 does, right? I don't know. It is what it is. At least that's my opinion on it. I think the styling is great. I think in C300 form, the car makes a lot of sense. But with the switch to 4 cylinders for everything, I'm not going to lie, I'm a bit worried about how the C53 and the C63 are going to turn out. And if you guys are big Mercedes fans, let me know if you're worried. I know I'm a little worried. I'm a little worried as to what the AMG cars are going to be. I don't know. We'll see. I hope they don't fall into this. Shout out to Nico for the like. Thank you, my man. Appreciate you tuning in. Appreciate you liking the stream. It helps out big time. Thank you. Terry says, anyone have experience with the glare on that touchscreen since it's kind of angled? That screen at the angle. I find it hard to believe that a brand like Mercedes wouldn't take something like that into consideration. But, I mean, we've seen crazier shit. You know what I mean? But I'm sure it's fine. Let's move on to something else that came out today, and that is the Ioniq 5. And for those of you that don't know, Ioniq is the new electric brand from Hyundai. So now all their ground up electric vehicles are going to be in this Ioniq sub-brand. And this is the first machine to come out of that. Now let's quickly just touch on it. I think this thing looks fucking awesome. Like, I think it looks really, really good. In terms of the electric vehicles that it competes against, cars like the Bolt, cars like the Model Y, cars like the Volkswagen ID3, ID4, I think this thing blows them all out of the water looks-wise. It's probably one of the more appealing to the eye EVs that I've seen ever, if I'm going to be honest. Jeff says it looks like a Lancia. You're totally right. I mean, it looks like a hatchback in the pictures, but let's not forget it's actually pretty big. And we'll touch on that in a second. Nico says, I wonder if they'll have the same taillight problems as every Hyundai. We'll see. Who knows? Maybe when it runs out of battery, but but anyway, poor jokes aside, let's quickly touch on the details of this car. So you get two battery options. You get a 58 kilowatt hour battery and you get a 72 and change kilowatt hour battery. You can get one motor or you can get two motors. What does that mean? It means you can either get rear wheel drive or you can get all wheel drive, which is great that they didn't do front wheel drive and all wheel drive, but they did rear and all wheel drive. Love that. Good move, Ioniq. The most range that you can get out of this is a single motor with the big battery of a Bolt at to any degree, right? And in that trim, it has 214 horsepower, 2 battery. That guy will have 302 horsepower and 446 pound-feet of torque, and it'll do 0 to 60 in 5 seconds. Not bad. Pretty good. Is it the 1.99 you can get at a Tesla Model S? No, but no one needs 1.99. 5 seconds will feel fast to you, I promise. Okay. The entry level for this is a single motor. It's a little bit longer and wider than Hyundai's small SUV, the Tucson. So to put that size in perspective there, it's a little bit bigger than like a RAV4, okay? What it also has is a vehicle to what I'll call lifestyle function. And what that means is you can use the charging, the battery in the Ioniq to power your devices. So you can use it to power things like bikes, things like scooters, camping equipment, whatever, up to 3.6 kilowatts, which is, that's a lot. That's a good amount. You can do a lot with that. And actually in their commercial for this car, they show it powering things like a treadmill, a refrigerator, a TV, speakers, whatever. Like you can actually power a good amount of stuff based on the battery in this thing. Charging time. You can go from 10% to 80% in just 18 minutes. Not bad. And if you only have 5 minutes, well, that'll give you 62 miles of range, which is double the daily average of 80% of Americans. So you can get 2 days worth of charge on average in 5 minutes. Not bad. That's really good, actually. I'm overall really excited for this. I think this is the best option right now that isn't a Tesla Model 3. Ionic's brand is ground up electric vehicles, so this isn't based on like, you know, a Hyundai sedan or something like that they then configured into an electric vehicle. This car was built ground up to be electric, so it has a frunk, it has a trunk, it has a really aesthetically pleasing interior that has all the vegan bullshit materials you want, so it's safe for the environment, whatever. I love this feature. Why is everyone doing these lay-down seats all of a sudden? This is sick, because there's nothing I want more when I'm waiting in my car while it's charging than to lay back and watch a movie. That's sick. And the Ioniq thought of that, right? So it's an aesthetically pleasing, all-electric, 300-mile range EV. Terry says, wow, nice. Still got that Hyundai warranty, though. I don't see why not. Hyundai has been giving that to not only their existing cars, kind of wouldn't make sense to me if they didn't apply. So who knows, they could come out of left field, say this thing costs 60 grand, and all of a sudden it's not worth it anymore, and it's actually kind of shitty, and you should just go get a Lucid Air or a Tesla Model Y, but I doubt that's going to be the case. I feel like the base model is going to be somewhere in the low 30s, and the dual motor, big battery one, I bet you touches mid 40s. Because, you know, you're getting some good juice for that. And the Tesla cargo capacity, it's a solid car. I'm actually really excited for this. I think Ioniq nailed it out of the park. Joe, did they announce pricing? I'll check right now, but at the time of me pulling the information, they didn't announce pricing. Let's look it up right now. Ioniq 5 pricing. I don't think anyone has it, but people are agreeing with me. They say it's going to start around 30-ish. Some people say it's going to start around 38. Others say it'll open at 45. Who knows? 42K base, you say. Let's see. I'll quickly go to Hyundai's website to see if they pulled up anything here. Yeah. Anyway, 42K base. Joe says in the chat, if he's right, this car still should qualify for the 7,500. Let's see. Does Ioniq 5 electric credit? It might, because it's an all new company, right? Which is pretty cool. So yeah, okay. Yeah, so it qualifies for, excuse me, qualifies for the EV tax credit. So that's 7,500 off that 42K base price. So you're looking at a relatively well-priced machine, which I think will be a really good asset in that EV infrastructure. And it makes me actually really excited for what the other Ioniq models are going to be. They're touting this thing as like the ultimate camping vehicle, because, you know, you can get it on wheel drive. It can power your camping shit. It's really clean, all that stuff, whatever. But I'm a big fan of this. I think this is really awesome. Big shout out to Hyundai for creating this brand and creating this vehicle. A lot of people should consider it. And if you still are on the train that you don't like Hyundai, I'm just going to come out and say it. You're an idiot. Because you should. Hyundai's making really cool stuff. And if you're missing out because, you know, you don't like Hyundai, hop on the train. They kick ass. Okay. Now let's get into some cars that I know some people in the chat are going to be really excited over. I know I am. I was actually really surprised to see the amount of pushback that the company got when they released this car. You guys know what I'm talking about probably, but if you don't, I'm talking about this guy. This, like Doug DeMuro, this is the Lexus IS 500 F Sport. And that's important, and we'll get to what that means in a second. But before we do, let's touch on the details of this car. So the Lexus IS 500, true to its name, has a 5.0 liter V8 with 40. Tune in Tokyo. 472 horsepower, 395 pound-feet of torque. That horsepower number at 7,100 RPM And that torque number at 4,800 RPM. Why are those so high? This is a naturally aspirated V8. It's that same V8 that's in the RCF. It's the same V8 that's in the LC. It's tried and true. It kicks ass. It sounds awesome. It revs really, really high. But what that means is there's not a lot of torque down low, right? It's just like the E92 M3. It's like, cars like the S2000, they need to be strung out, right? But because of that, it has a slightly slower 0 to 60 than its competition, 4.5 seconds. Still crazy fast, okay? 8-speed automatic, as is par for the course for Lexus at this point. It's got a Torsen limited slip diff, which kicks ass. It's got adaptive variable suspension standard, which is new for the Lexus IS line ever since they introduced this generation of the IS. And it's actually reported to be really, really good, like a solid suspension setup. It's got 14-inch two-piece aluminum discs in the front and 12.7-inch discs in the rear. This weighs 3,900 pounds, and its price hasn't been announced, but is probably going to be in the 60s. Low to mid 60s is what a lot of people are guessing. Okay. Jeff, I'm in love. You're totally right. Terry, yeah, screw the haters. Agreed. No doubt. Joe, Tiger Woods probably doesn't like Hyundai after today. Yeah, yikes. What a scenario that is. Terry, 2UR. Totally. So let's talk about what people's reaction were to this thing, okay? I'm actually going to pull up a post that I made about this car, and we're going to live read some of the comments because I'm curious to see if you guys agree with this, knowing what the car competes against, if you have the same feelings that a lot of other people do. Okay, let me pull up the post. I know I should have probably had those beforehand, but that's okay. We're all friends here. We can hang out while you guys check out the photos of this IS 500 F Sport. So actually, as I look up this post, let's talk about why the nomenclature is really, really important here. So they're calling this the IS 500 F Sport. They didn't, okay? They're like, the reason why this is the F Sport and not the F is because a crazier one is and should be coming, or should be and is coming. Which is good news, right? This sits in between the IS 350 F Sport and where an IS F would lie. This is right in the middle. And I love that. Think of this like a C43, an M340i, something like that, right? So with that out of the way, let me talk about some of the comments that some people had over this car. I don't know if I agree with them, but I understand where a lot of them are coming from because, everybody wants the moon and back and they can't get it and it sucks. Okay, let's read some of these comments. The front end looks legit like a Toyota Camry now. I actually love the design of this. It's not 2008 anymore. Lexus really needs to start giving their F cars turbos if they're going to weigh 2 tons or more. The V8 makes the same power as a twin-turbo V8 in the C-Class and the twin-turbo i6 in the M3. And it's naturally aspirated, which means it's not going to have the same getup, right? Michelle says, this car reminds me of the GSF from Lexus. I'm really looking forward to it. And that's a great analogy because what the GSF brought to that sort of slightly larger rear-wheel drive sedan space was something that was fun to drive. And sure, maybe it wasn't as fast as the M5. Maybe it wasn't as fast as the E63. Shout out to Jillian Rose. But what that car provided to that space was fun behind the wheel, not thrust like cars like the M5 and E63. And I have a feeling this will do the same. If you look at current reviews of how the facelifted IS stacks up to cars like the 3 Series, the biggest things you get is that the IS has the best chassis, the best steering. It just lacked a couple things like power. And what does this do? It gives it more power. Sure. Is the interior a little antique? Yeah, the car came out in 2014. Okay. They updated the center stack there to give it Apple CarPlay. That's why that screen looks a little out of place in that whole interior, because it is just tacked on. So you now have a touchscreen and you now have this thing, the engine it deserved. make something like this? Why isn't Lexus producing anything? They should produce it. Why don't they produce it, right? And what he was saying was that a lot of the deals that Lexus had got themselves into, okay, a lot of the production deals, cornered them in a way that they couldn't innovate enough to create something like this profitably. But he said, rest assured, we're going to be doing what we can to produce something that we feel is of value. And this is the car he's talking about. And let's not forget what this thing is. It's probably one of the last, if not the last, naturally aspirated V8 rear-wheel drive sedans we're ever going to see. Like ever. And yet, 90% of the comments that I received on this car was, wow, the interior is outdated. I hate head units like that. Shame, no manual. Oh, another Lexus that blends in with traffic. Something, wake up and smell the coffee. This is the last of the real ones. This is it. You're looking at it. Right? Like, we just touched on, okay? We just touched on the fact that Mercedes, their entire C-Class lineup, which competes with this car, is going 4-cylinder. And in spite of that, Lexus created a naturally aspirated V8. Right? Brian, they make Jeeps stock faster than this thing. Yes, in 0 to 60. Totally agree. But just like the GSF, I bet you this car is more fun to drive in the canyons. I bet you this car is more engaging to take on an off-ramp. Right? And you'll see, mark my words, jot it down. Take out your pen, okay? Grab a notebook. Take a seat at your office. Turn on your lamp, okay? Turn a new page. Turn a new leaf. Right. February 23, 2021. Quotes. The Lexus LS, whiteout. Restart. Quotes. The Lexus IS 500 is the last great V8 sedan we ever receive. That's reasonably priced. End quote. Close. After the pen dries in your notebook. Close your light. Get up, go to bed, and cry. Because this is the last V8 we're going to see probably. And yet, we as a car community are finding a way to bitch about it. We are. Yeah, I know that 0 to 60 isn't 2 seconds. Yes, I know that 0 to 60 isn't 3 seconds. But it's a naturally aspirated high-revving V8. What do you expect? Right? Ugh, it kills me. Kills me. This guy hit the nail out of the park, right? He says, God, people are really shitting on a new NA V8 saloon at a decent price in 2021. No wonder why they don't build enthusiast cars anymore. Mic drop. That is the truth. Look at this thing. It's beautiful. Does it have big bulging fenders? Does it have a huge spoiler? Does it have garish carbon fiber everywhere? No. No. But it'll run forever. It'll sound amazing. And it'll look damn good while doing it. Damn good. I really, really enjoy this car. I like it. I like it a lot. Like a lot. To the tune that when it comes out, I'm keyed in on this thing. Very much so. I really, really like this car. But seems like everyone in the stream likes it too. Hopefully they like it enough to smash the like button on the stream. Just throwing that out there. Because I know I do, right? This thing is gorgeous. Wheels done by NK, like beautiful sound. This thing's going to be the real deal for sure. And a lot of people are going to be miffed that they didn't hop on the train when they could because they missed out on one of the best cars of our era. For sure. For sure. For sure. For sure. All right, let's move on to the last car and what is probably the most expensive car we've ever talked about on the Money Shift podcast. Okay. Michelle, great timing, by the way, with that comment. Michelle says, I'm over hypercars. I'm over crazy high horsepower M5s and M3s. This is what the car world needs. I hear you, man. On this. And what you guys are looking at is the Gordon Murray TS50 Niki Lauda. And this is the track-only version of the Gordon Murray TS50, a car that he released, I don't know, a couple months back at this point. Let's talk about the details of what this car is, okay? 725 horsepower, which is up from 650 in the street car. That power is from a 3.9 over there. They're unbelievable. That engine revs to 12,100 RPM. 12,000. That engine revs to 12,100 RPM. This car uses an X-Track 6-speed manual paddle shift transmission. So it's paddles like a race car, right? I mean, it is a race car. There's no doubt. Important to note, in the road car, you can get a manual transmission, okay? All the exterior panels are unique, and they're made of carbon fiber. The glass even has a lighter glazing on it, and all of that means that this car weighs, drumroll please, 1,878 pounds. Say that one more time. This car weighs 1,878 pounds. Now, even if that's dry, right? Let's say that's not with gas, oil, all the trans fluids, everything you need. Add a couple 100 pounds for that. Even if this thing weighs 2,000 pounds, that's insane. Okay? They lowered the ride height. They gave this thing new springs, new dampers, new roll bars. They gave it a new splitter in the front, new side skirts, crazy new diffuser in the rear, big wing, big shark fin, and it still has that big ass fan in the back that is so popular with the Gordon Murray TS50. Teve says, for sure, fed up with all these crazy high number everything cars that'll only be museum pieces in some stuck-up garage. But when you saw it in videos, it definitely was a smaller car. I would say it's slightly smaller than something like a Huracan, right? Yeah, and Teve, I agree. And that opens up a whole nother can of worms conversation, right? Because this thing is $4.3 million. $4.3 million. That's a lot of money. Like, it doesn't matter how you slice it. That's a lot of money. Big shout, Teve, with the 50 stars, dude. Thank you for that. Thank you for supporting the stream. Seriously, appreciate it. $4.3 million. You know what that means to me? Okay. What that means to me is this could be the best track car of all time, right? It could have change of direction steering like an F1 car. It could have similar speeds to an LMP car. But because it costs $4.3 million, who's going to use it? Who's going to take it to a track? Who's going to take this thing to 10/10ths? And that was the problem that we had originally with the Gordon Murray T50. Right? The car's perfect. It has a small engine that revs to the moon. It's light. It has 3 seats. It's comfortable. The regular version doesn't have the big spoiler like this does. The regular version has 3 seats where this one has 2. This one has just the center, and the one to the left, the one on the right, has been replaced with switchgear and an extinguisher that you see right here. But the regular car is $3 million. So if you're telling me you're creating the ultimate Grand Tourer, or in this case, the ultimate track car, but you're charging north of $3 million, $4 million for these cars, who the fuck is going to use it? The risk of binning this thing into a wall, and now you just ruined a 1 of 25 machine that I'm sure cost an immense number to fix, is insane, right? Like, it blows my mind. Like, sure, don't get me wrong. Like, this car is incredible. It's got an exhaust option that actually makes the car quieter because of how loud that 3.9 liter V12 can get. And I'm sure it sounds divine. I'm sure it goes like hell. I'm sure it drives amazing. But it's $4.3 million. Joe says, I'm not excited enough about this to write any more words than this. Terry says, this is better than the countless special edition McLarens. I will say, though, something that those special edition McLarens do, like the Speedtail, like the Sabre, like the Senna, is they don't cost $4 million. And people actually take them on track. I know a couple people that track Sennas. I don't think anyone's going to track this thing. Maybe one lunatic out of the 25. Maybe one. Everyone else, paperweight. And that's a damn shame for a car that was created with the name of one of the best drivers ever, Niki Lauda. The car was released on his birthday, February 22nd. Rest in peace to one of the greatest drivers, Niki Lauda. It doesn't matter. This car's useless. It's a paperweight. Like, this car is the biggest flex ever. You have a fan car. You have a car with a small V12 that revs to over 12,000. You have a car with a center seat. If you get the road legal version, you have all of that with a manual transmission. And all of that is super cool. But who cares? It's $4 million. They're making 25 of these. They're making 40 of the road car. Who cares? Jeff says even Lauda wouldn't track that. He probably, I'm sure he would track it, but like, would he be pumped? I don't know. The thing that I'm more excited about is the fact that Gordon is actually going to, and we talked about it a little bit on this show, and I'll try to pull up if there's any more details on that thing. But let's see. Gordon Murray. He's going to be making a more affordable car. That information was released in 2020. It was talked about in 2019. And that's the thing I'm more excited about. Gordon Murray Automotive is going to be making a more affordable car. He says, quote, I'd like the next car to be a little bit more conventional. Car is the T50, and he doesn't want any future models to take away from that. So he said, quote, it won't be necessarily the most powerful or the fastest, but it'll likely have somewhere around 215 to 220 horsepower, and it'll be really light, and it'll probably be mid-engine. Now, to make that cheaper car, I'm all for it. I get it. Because that's the Tesla model, right? Tesla made the Roadster, which cost over $100,000, and it was effectively a Lotus Elise. And he used that money to then make the S, which then used that money to then make the X, and then the 3, and then the Y, and then the $25,000 car, right? And if Gordon's going down that same path, we're in there, and I'm about it. But until I see that car, I'm just going to be disappointed by this thing. I am. And it sucks to say because I'm sure it's incredible. I'm sure it's really, really good. Really, really good, but it doesn't scratch the same itch like when he drops this car is going to in myself. That's for sure. Shout out to Michelle with the 100 stars. Thank you, my man. I appreciate it. Appreciate you tuning in for the whole stream, by the way. Hope all is well. Joe says you could buy 400,000 spec Miatas for that price. Let that sink in. Can you just think about that for a second? Holy cow. 400,000 Miatas for the price of this thing. I just can't see, like, and maybe this is just a product of me not being incredibly wealthy, but like, if I had $4 million, right? Let's say I have a $4 million budget and I'm tasked to buy automobiles. It's like, hey, you can get whatever you want, but you have to spend $4 million and you don't have room for 400,000 spec Miatas. Sorry, Joe. What would I buy? I can tell you it wouldn't be just one of these. It wouldn't. And I'd probably have a shit ton of money left over, right? You buy one crazy thing, like a 911 996 GT1. One crazy thing, mental. That car probably costs $1 million. I have no fucking idea. But then you scale it back. You buy really cool things for less than that. You buy the Gunther that we talked about earlier, right? This car that we talked about that we're like, wow, that's a crazy price, $500,000. $500,000 is chump change compared to that $4 million Gordon Murray car we talked about. And yeah, that Gordon Murray car is a lot cooler than this Gunther Works car. But I'll tell you, I bet you I got just as big of a smile driving this thing on the street. Because at $500,000, if I hit a pothole, I'll still cry, but it'd be a lot less of a cry than it would in a $3 million, $4 million Gordon Murray T50. For sure. For sure. And that's my rant, guys. Like, I love the car. I love that it exists. I love what it shows, right? The fact that you can create a car that has unbelievable aerodynamic efficiencies, leverages a small motor that revs to the moon, none of this hybrid bullshit, no turbos, naturally aspirated. This is the way. But I don't get the price tag. And I'm sure they already all sold out. I'm sure all 25 of these are already gone. But I'm sure 24 of them are paperweights. I'm willing to bet on that. And that's really sad. That sucks. Because for a lot less than that, I can buy this thing. I can buy this thing. I can buy a bunch of these. Look how many Kia Carnivals could I get? I could start the Barnum and Bailey circus worth of Kia Carnivals for the amount that Gordon Murray car costs, right? I could get an Ioniq 5 in every battery trim and every color and have millions left over. I could buy every allocation of the IS 500F Sport they're going to make and have millions left over. I could buy every single 4-cylinder C-Class and burn them all to the ground and have millions left over. It's nuts, guys. It's nuts. Absolutely nuts. I don't know. That's my biggest thing. Like it really does shock me, you know? And I think that's the best place to end the stream. Like I'm worked up. I'm fired up. I'm fired up that car exists because it shows that you can do all of those things without turbos or hybrid power. But what it also does is cost $4 million. So thank you everybody for tuning into the stream today. If you shot a like, if you shot a follow, if you sent stars, you're my favorite. I love each and every one of you. Thank you so much for tuning in for the full hour. We had a ton of news today, and I appreciate everybody for sticking around. The conversation was killer, and it was really great just spicing it up with the chat. For those of you that are new to the Money Shift podcast, we do this every Tuesday. Usually we start at around 7:30 Eastern time, but it's 7:30 p.m., but sometimes it's 8, depending on days like today, where there's a lot of car news. I know I tease this every week, but potentially we're going to stretch this out to 2. Maybe one early week, like a Monday, Tuesday, and one end of week, like a Friday, Saturday, because seemingly there's more and more car news coming out and we can have this conversation twice. Maybe we can bring in more of you guys every week, have you on stage clubhouse style, and we can just have a discussion during this time. I think that would be really, really cool to be able to get everyone in the same room and we can stream it and talk about it and just talk cars for one of those sessions. Let me know what you guys think with that. DM me your thoughts. I'd love to do that, have that conversation with everybody. But yeah, thank you everybody for joining. I will see you next week for sure at 7:30. And if you guys want to listen to this podcast again, I actually record this in a non-thank you for the stars type of medium that you can get on every platform, Spotify, Apple, Google, whatever. you can get it anywhere and everywhere whenever you want. And that always drops every Wednesday. So you guys can find the podcast there. Don't forget to follow the page. And thank you very much. Shout out to Patricia for the 100 stars to end the stream. I will see you guys next week.